Who I have missed?
Chair, the Deputy Chair looks to have joined.
Okay. Malcolm Wilkinson.
Evening, Chair. I'm Tony Kindlish, a Senior Auditor with the Internal Audit Team.
Okay, thank you, Tony. There's Malcolm Wilkinson there.
Yes, I'm here, Kevin, yeah.
Good evening.
I can't see everybody's faces on this one. I don't know, I'm trying to work that one out.
All right. But for the time being, could you just introduce yourself?
Yes, Malcolm Wilkinson, Deputy Chair of North Tyneside Council's Audit Committee.
Thank you.
Chair, it looks like Councillor Richardson's here.
Hello, yes, Paul Richardson, Councillor for Munseaton North. I was here, I just hadn't unmuted. I should know that by now, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Okay, I'll repeat what I said earlier. Is there anyone else present who I've missed?
Yes. My name is Barbara Mackay. I'm Group Assurance Manager with the Shared Internal Audit and Risk Management Service.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yes, Chair. Kathy Davison, Principal Accountant of the Finance Service.
Thank you, Kathy. Anyone else?
Chair, Dave Park, and I'm the clerk for the committee.
Thank you, Dave. Anyone else? In that case, let's press on. For today's meeting, we must first of all deal with the formality, i.e. apologies for absence, declarations of interest, confirmation of minutes. The agenda papers contain 10 reports requiring decisions at this meeting. The committee will be asked to pass the exclusion resolution to be able to consider agenda item 14 in private session, and the live stream will be switched off at that point. I will take each of the reports in turn in the order they appear on the agenda, which has been published on the Council's website. For each of the reports, I will ask the relevant officer to introduce the item. I will then ask members if they have any questions, and will then also ask if members wish to make a comment on the report. I will then ask members if they wish to approve the recommendations contained in the report. In terms of etiquette for the meeting, can I propose the following? Only one speaker at a time who should state their name before speaking. Only speak when invited to do so by myself or Dave. Everyone should mute their microphone and turn off their video unless they are speaking. If referring to any specific points in a report, please specify the page number. Please don't shuffle papers around when microphones are switched on, as they may interfere with sounds. If the screen freezes while someone is speaking, I'll attempt to wait a little while to give the member officer the opportunity to repeat what they are saying. Okay, if we can move on to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, David?
I've not been advised of any, Chair.
Good, thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare an interest in any of the items of business on the agenda? Okay, that is a no. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting. And I sign the minutes of the last meeting with the correct record.
Agreed.
Agreed.
On to item 4, which is certification of claims and returns annual report. And Stephen Reid of Ernst Young will introduce this item and present his report.
Thank you, Chair. Stephen Reid here from Ernst & Young. I'll ask Stuart Kenny from Ernst & Young to present this item, Chair.
Thanks, Stephen. So this is the annual grant certification report that we're required to report back to the committee, and this sets out the work that we've performed in relation to our certification of the council's housing benefits subsidy return and also the teachers' pensions return, and that's for 2018-19. This work was actually completed in November 2019 in line with the deadline set by both the DWP and the teachers' pensions, but due to current circumstances in relation to COVID, this is the first committee that we've actually been able to formally report our responses and our work back to. The findings from both reviews are set out in the report. However, as the findings were relatively minor, I don't intend to go through them in any detail, but I am happy to take any questions on the report, Chair.
Thank you, Stuart. Does any member have a question? If not, does any member have a comment?
Yes, Chairman.
Go ahead, Judith.
Thank you, Chairman. My comment relates to page 18 of this section. It's about EY, the final part of it, which says that EY is a global leader, insights and quality services and so forth. The committee may remember that when EY was appointed as external auditors, I did ask how they could give us assurance, from their work that we could rely upon with regard to the council's finances and everything else that it covered. The lead on that occasion said that it was very, very positive there, and I did voice my concerns about several high-profile disasters, I think, which had been reported in the press. I was thinking of Carillion and Patisserie Valerie. And EY's representative that evening was very keen to point out that they had not been involved in any of those. Since then, of course, we've had a number of other high-profile disasters, and I'm thinking here of Thomas Cook and very recently of Wirecard. And I'm just wondering if EY is intending to perhaps amend what they, or perhaps add to what they said to the committee some months ago, or indeed what's included in the statement about EY, because there have been several lengthy reports about the failings, and it gives me cause for concern as a member of this audit committee.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wallace. I don't know if Stephen would like to take this.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, I'm not in a position, and it would be inappropriate to comment in relation to either the two specific client matters that Councillor Wallace raised. However, I'm comfortable that the statement that's on the reverse of that report, and indeed is on all of our reports, remain entirely appropriate. As Councillor Wallace and other members will be aware, like all other professional services firms, we are subject to independent review by the regulator. And just some 10 days ago, the regulator published the reviews, the reports into each of the firms, and that's available on the FRC's website. And while the results of those audits remain positive for EY in comparison to many of the other reports, We still have more to do, and we recognise that, and in the public statements that we've made in relation to audit quality, that remains an absolute fundamental priority for us, and we are continuing to invest in that area. And Chair, as you're aware, we've also been subject to FRC review in relation to the audit for North Tyneside Council, but I'll leave that matter with you to comment further on this stage.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Councillor Wallace, would you like to come back on that one, or are you satisfied?
Well, I flagged my concerns, Chairman. Can I just ask whether the external auditors will be present for item 7, which is the annual statement of accounts, or whether they will have left this meeting by then? If they will have left, I've got a question that I'd like to pose now.
Through you, Chair, if I may, Councillor Wallace, we will remain present throughout the meeting, either Stuart or myself. I have another engagement this evening, so depending on the timing of the meeting, I may not be here myself, but Stuart Kenny certainly will be.
Okay, well, thank you, Chairman. I'll pose my question at that point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other members have a comment? In that case, can I ask all members to turn on their microphones and ask, do members wish to approve the recommendation contained in the report for item 4?
Agreed.
Agreed. Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 5. Audit planning report for the year ended 31st of March 2020. Presume Stephen or Stuart will take this one.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take this item. So, Chair, as you highlight, this is our external audit plan for undertaking the 2019-20 external audit. Obviously, the plan will continue to evolve and will continue to respond to any emerging risks. We had developed the external audit plan to be presented to the Audit Committee on the 25th of March, but obviously as a result of the revised working arrangements and government restrictions that were put in place as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, that meeting was cancelled. Nonetheless, we did share the plan with officers, but for tonight's meeting, we have taken the opportunity to revisit our risk assessment in relation to the 2019-20 audit. And we've updated this plan, which is before the committee this evening, to reflect our updated risk assessment. Chair, there's a few pages I'll focus on, if I may, and draw a few of the key areas, and then very happy to take any questions or observations. So turning firstly to page 23 in the pack, which summarises and provides an overview of our 2019-20 audit strategy. We highlight there the key areas of focus from an external audit perspective on the draft financial statements. The first two items there are in relation to audit risks, significant risks in respect of the risk of fraud and revenue and expenditure recognition and misstatement due to fraud or error, focusing on management override. For all audits, those are rebuttable significant risks, and similar to last year, significant risks for Council for that very reason. We've highlighted next evaluation of land and buildings, and again we highlight that as a significant risk in respect of the audit. We've highlighted that as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the challenges that professional valuers had to value property and fixed assets at the 31st of March balance sheet date of the Council, the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors has issued guidance to valuers highlighting that given COVID-19 that there is a material uncertainty in property valuation completed at the 31st of March. We've obviously, and we'll take that into account in concluding our work, both in relation to the level of work that we'll do over the property, plant and equipment the balance sheet, given that that is a significant value, but also we'll give consideration to the impact that may have on the form of our opinion, and whether it would be appropriate through an emphasis of matter, in our opinion, to draw attention to that material uncertainty statement from the Council's valuers. We've then highlighted going concern and the impact of COVID-19. Clearly under statute, the Council is a going concern, but under auditing standard, as external auditors, we are required to carry out an independent assessment of the Council's ability to continue as a going concern. And the work in the context of the authorities will primarily focus on the adequacy of the disclosures within the financial statement, both in relation to the impact of COVID-19 on 2019-20, but perhaps most importantly, the continuing impact of COVID-19, both on the operations of the Council, governance arrangements of the Council, and the financial plan, the medium-term financial plan in 2020, 2021 and beyond. We highlight, consistent with last year, pension liability valuation, given that there are judgments there and the use external actuaries to support their derivation of the liability in relation to pensions, given the additional challenges around asset valuations, particularly the more difficult to value assets in pension funds. And we will again continue to use our internal actuarial specialists, as we will in terms of the valuation of land and property highlighted in this plan, use our EY specialist valuation team. We've highlighted on page 24, Chair, group financial statement and the need for the Council to consider whether it's appropriate to prepare group financial statements, given the increasing activities in the Council's budget, and that's an area that we'll be following up on as part of our year-end audit work. IFRS 16, which is a new accounting requirement being brought in for local government, was planned to be brought in. That has been deferred as a result of COVID-19, and that is no longer applicable 2019-20. So because that is intent, that change, we've highlighted there that we've removed that from the audit plan for this year. So those are the key financial statement risks, Chair, from an external audit perspective. As I've said, we will keep that under review as the audit progresses. In terms of value for money, which is the other specific area of our responsibilities, we have highlighted, again, consistent with last year, financial sustainability and value for money risk. Clearly, in addition to the original planned work beyond that, we obviously now need to take into account what the Council is undertaking in terms of managing COVID and the impact that that is having on the Council's financial medium-term plan. On page 25 there, I set out in summary form the level of materiality that we're intending to undertake the audit to, so I draw that to the Audit Committee for any comments or questions. Just to confirm that we have reassessed our materiality in light of COVID-19, but concluded that our materiality as assessed at 1.8% or 11.6 million planning materiality perspective remains appropriate. Chair, I'll pause there other than to draw your attention to the fuller details within the main body of the plan, and particularly draw your attention to the audit timetable and other sections around independence and the appendices outlining our planned audit fee for the year, together with the matters summarised in the appendices required to communicate to the Audit Committee in accordance with professional standards. So very happy to pause there, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Do we have any questions from members?
Councillor Wallace, Chair.
Councillor Wallace? You're on mute. Councillor Wallace.
Sorry, thank you. It relates to page 24, Chairman, the first line regarding the group financial statements. I'm pleased that this issue has been raised. It is one that I have raised with officers in the past, because I do think they should all be available. Can either the external auditors or possibly Janice tell us that that is likely to happen? The group financial statements will be produced, please. I think it would give a far better picture of the council's finances in the round.
Okay, thank you. Janice, do you want to answer that, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. At this stage, we aren't actually required to produce group financial statements. The interests that we have do not meet the requirements of group statements at this stage, but obviously it's something we continue to review every year. And once we meet the required threshold levels, then yes, we will be required to produce those statements, but they haven't been required for 1920.
Thank you, Janice. Councillor Wallace.
Whilst I appreciate that it's not required, clearly the external auditors do think that it is important, and I would suggest that in the interests of transparency, so people can see the situation as a whole, that it would be important whether required or not. Thank you, Chairman.
Chair Stuart Kennedy wants to come in.
Thank you. Stuart.
Thanks, Chair. It was just to say that we have held discussions about the group account situation, and actually as part of the draft financial statements that you're going to see, there are a number of group disclosures that have been added. We are still continuing to discuss that with officers, just in terms of certain areas and making it a little bit fuller, but in particular the primary statements this year do show the group elements, so the comprehensive income and expenditure statement and balance sheet of both single entities, so council and group.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Councillor Wallace, would you like to come back on that one?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Does any other member have a question? Does any member have a comment? In that case, can I ask all members to turn on their microphones and ask, do members wish to approve the recommendations contained in the report?
Agreed.
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
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 Okay, thank you. If we could now move on to item 6 on the agenda, audit market reform and revised auditing standards. It's either Stuart or
Chair, thank you, Chair. Stephen Reid here. I'll pick this one up. Chair, as part of our commitment to keep the committee and members up to date with developments in the audit environment, we provided this paper this evening. I'm just going to draw attention to 2 key pages of the paper. As referred to earlier in the meeting, there has been a number of matters reported in the press over the last 24 months, probably or so. And in response, there have been a number of reviews launched in relation to the responsibilities of auditors, the conduct of audit, the governance frameworks and the responsibilities of directors. And some of those are summarised on page 62. It is clear in response to a number of the corporate failures there will be, and the UK government is on record, as well as the regulator, for wishing to drive change in those 3 areas that I've highlighted. And I summarise here some of the key potential areas of change which will take place. Clearly, much but not all of the change will be subject to finding parliamentary time to allow the suite of recommendations that have come from the different reviews to be brought together into a comprehensive format to effect legislative change. But there's already some change taking place in relation to changes to the FRC and the regulator, and also to some of the voluntary changes which the professional firms are adopting in response to many of the findings. So with that, Chair, I wasn't going to say any more, but very happy to take any observations or comments.
Thank you, Stephen. Does any members have a question? Does any member have a comment? In that case, can I again ask all members to turn on their
Chair,
microphone?
Councillor McMullen.
Sorry, Councillor McMullen.
Hi, sorry, I was looking through it. I'm seeing like potential implications and the things that can go wrong. Is there any benefits that are in here? We've got the CMA on page 64. It just seems to be a sign of things that are going wrong. There's no positives in here. Just wondering if that's just a bias I've read, or if that's the intent, or is there any potential positives?
Chair, thank you, Chair. I think the point of slide 64, Councillor, is very much to highlight the impact, an excerpt of the impact and potential impact in relation to some of the regulatory reviews and reform, and that's shown along the top of that slide. So it's very likely, and it's been clearly signalled, that there'll be greater scrutiny of audit committees for FTSE 350 companies. There will be mandatory joint audit or peer review. As has been reported in the press over the last week or so, the operational split between the Big Four audit and non-audit parts of the firms, and changes to tendering arrangement. Now, many of these reviews have been focused on the corporate reporting, and I would just draw members' attention. Clearly, these will, the findings from these reviews will first be brought to bear on the corporate world. But like all things, then there will undoubtedly be some impact on local government in due course. In addition to these reviews, of course, there is also the Redmond review, which has been taking place, looking at audit and reporting within the public sector, and also ongoing reviews by the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, or CIPFA, in relation to financial reporting in local government. So I think what I'm signalling here, Councillor, through this presentation or pack, that the next number of years are going to bring ongoing change to corporate reporting, corporate governance, responsibility of those charged with governance, and indeed the audit process and product.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Does anyone else have a point to make? Comments, questions? In that case, can I ask all members to turn on their microphones and ask, do members wish to approve the recommendations contained in the report?
Agreed.
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 7 on the agenda, 2019-20 Statement of Accounts draft. Janice Gillespie will provide a report on this, but I think in addition she intends to give us a presentation. So Janice, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's a short introductory report for the annual statement accounts, which kind of sets out for the committee change in the timetable that we are required to work to. So normally by the 31st of July, we would have expected to have audited and be ready to publish the audited set of accounts. clearly those timetables were changed in respect of, as a result of COVID, and the timetable was shifted such that we are required to have the accounts audited completion by the 30th of November. It's fair to say we continue to work to achieve as close as possible or as reasonable to the original timetable, bearing in mind that we had a number of, I guess, other changes and challenges to deal with. But we did publish the draft statement of accounts on the council's website on the 3rd of July. So yes, a bit later than the 31st of May, but all things considered, not bad that we managed to achieve the 31st of July. And indeed, Stuart and the team have started their audit work as we speak. It remains a meaty document, and clearly what we haven't had the chance to do is any more training around the statement of accounts, but I know a couple of members did the SIPFA course that was available. But actually Claire has a presentation to take you through the key highlights as we see them of the statements. So if we do that first, and then we're happy to take any questions. What I will add is that historically we would have brought an accounting policies report for the committee to have consideration of and endorse, but clearly because we've had to prepare the accounts, it didn't seem right that we then asked you to endorse the accounting policies, because actually we have had to apply them in accordance with the code, etc., in terms of deriving the accounting policies. So I understand the original report is included in the papers as for information for the committee. I do also have a presentation on the accounting policies. I don't propose to give that tonight because we do have a meaty agenda, but certainly we can circulate that presentation because I think it helps to put into context which different parts of the accounts are affected by accounting policies in a particular way. So we can share that with the committee with the minutes or following the meeting. But if Claire, if we hand over to Claire to present kind of the overall position on the statements at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Claire?
Right, can everybody see the presentation as it stands at the moment? I'll put it on slideshow and hopefully my machine will still work. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's fine, thank you.
Right,
Yeah.
2 seconds. I've just got to try and bring something else on the screen. So, right, that's great. So you can still see the presentation as it stands, yeah? Brilliant. So as now, why isn't that moving for me? Sorry, bit of a technical difficulty. Right, so I think Janice has already gone through some of the main changes in terms of the regulations, so I don't intend to go through that again. Obviously, we're currently going through the external audit process at the moment, and that commenced on the 6th of July. We've got an audit committee booked in for the 18th of November, so that's in advance of the publication date, and obviously it's an audit committee responsibility now to sign off the accounts. So that still gives us plenty of time for the cut-off date of the 30th of November. Like I say, Janice has already gone through the changes to the regulations, so I won't cover that as such. But we've got the comprehensive income and expenditure statement and the balance sheet. So what I'm going to cover just within both of those is just some of the high-level movements between 1819 and 1920. So in terms of the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, the cost of services has gone down from 165469 to 132157. In the main, that relates to accounting adjustments, so one-off capital account adjustments that happened in 2018-19 in relation to valuations on Swans and on the Spanish City. And that was on the general fund side. And for the HRA, there was also a one-off capital adjustment around impairment on the HRA as well. So the 33 million change, it's more an accounting adjustment rather than it being something that specifically relates to individual services themselves.
Can I just ask what we're referring to here, because are we referring to a page in the accounts or Because I've just got draft annual financial report on the screen here.
Claire, the slides aren't moving.
Oh, they're not moving. Oh, sorry. Hang on, I'll try and I'll unshare it and then I'll try and share it again. Sorry. Is that presenting there now? Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah? Right, okay. Just needed to think of something else. Can you see that? Can you still see that there now?
Can you try
Right.
moving it on one to see if it works?
Does that move on?
No, it's not working.
Oh.
What else you putting up?
Nothing. It's just I'm working on two screens. So when I'm trying to bring it up on one screen, it's not working on that screen. I'll try and swap my screens over. 2 seconds. Sorry, technical difficulties. So, can you see that moving there now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, brilliant. Wonderful. So I'll just go back to what I've just said previously then. So this is the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, and the cost of services, it's gone down from 165,469 million to 132,157. And like I've said, that's in the main down to one-off capital accounting adjustments that took place in 2018-19. So in relation to revaluations for the Spanish City and for Swans. And there was also a revaluation within the HRA as well. So it's not specific services, it's more one-off capital accounting adjustments as to where that's actually come from. Is that okay?
Yep.
Yep. Does everybody see that?
Yeah.
I'm just making sure now that I've had my technical difficulties. So just on the top line here, you've got your other operating expenditure, which is note 10. I don't intend to go down each of them individually and go through each one, but I do have obviously where there's been a high level movement or where there's been a movement, I'll explain those ones specifically. So other operating expenditure has gone down by 506,000. In the main, it relates to gains on disposals of non-current assets and the changes between two financial years. So in 18-19, we had a gain of 1.869 million. And then in 1920, that's now just 1.297 million. So it's the reduction in, even though we have had gains on assets that's been disposed of, it is just that obviously we had more of those in 18-19 than what we have done in 1920 in terms of value wise. Is that okay? Yep. So note 11, which is the next line down, so the financing and investment income and expenditure. So in the main, this relates to the dividend that we've had from the trading company, from the airport and from Kia, and also a reduction in the pension interest expense. So the movement of 1.871 million encapsulates all of that. And that's where the main variations came from. There was other minor variations of 28,000, but obviously I don't have those individually, but that's in the main where those came from. Note 12, taxation and non-specific grant income. So that's increased by 833,000. This was mainly to do with additional capital grants that we received in advance. So the North East Local Enterprise Partnership, the Local Growth Fund, we got, there was an increase in that of 805,000, which is the majority of the 833 movement. So it's in relation to additional capital grants that we received in advance. That's all I intended to go through on the comprehensive income and expenditure statement. I'm happy to pause there if anybody has any specific questions on this before I move on to the balance sheet.
Okay, thank you. Claire, does anybody have a question or a comment?
Chair, it's Janice here. It's probably just worth mentioning that probably the biggest shift on the income and expenditure statement is online with respect to note 33, which is the movements associated with the pension fund valuation. So we've talked historically about, we can see big swings one way or another as a result of the pension fund valuation. So that's It doesn't affect the bottom line of the authority per se in terms of our net balances, etc. But obviously that is a big movement in terms of the overall picture of the accounts.
Okay, thank you. Any comments? In that case, back to you, Claire.
Brilliant. So moving on to the balance sheet then, the net assets have increased from 82.978 million to 128.933 million. I'll just go back onto the previous sheet so you can see some of where that's came from. So that's an increase of 45.955 million in the main. It's around property, plant and equipment, and also the decrease in pension liability. Just to give you a little bit of more information around the property, plant and equipment and where some of those changes have happened. So our infrastructure assets have increased by just over 10 million. And that was in the main around where there've been some completion of some large highways projects. Some of those, just to give you examples, are around North Bank of Tyne infrastructure, so improvements to junctions there. At the A19 Hadricks Mill and also Killingworth Way highways improvements. So the majority of the property, plant and equipment movement comes from there, and also from the pension liability change. Moving on to the current assets. So those have increased by 40 million to 117,517. In the main, that relates to an increase in short-term deposits. So it's cash and cash equivalents that relates to, and they've increased by 27.008 million to 36.849 million from 1819 to 1920. Assets held for sale. So those have increased by just over 3.3 million to 3.571 million. And that's due to the reclassification of the Swan site. So previously that would have been within property, plant and equipment, and now that's obviously an asset that's being held for sale. So it's moved it into this classification, on the balance sheet. Short-term debtors have also increased by 10 million to 75.792 million. The variance mainly relates to payments made in advance in respect of to businesses around COVID-19. So some of the local support grants and some of the business grants, obviously, that we've been able to distribute to local businesses as part of the impact of COVID-19 and those grants that we received. Current liabilities are at the bottom of the page, so you can just see them there. So they're 128.616 million in 1920 compared to 125.962 million in 1819. The main increase around this is around provisions for additional appeals for NNDR of 2.654 million. And obviously we've increased the provision based on the expectation that we're going to have a higher level of appeals that are going to come through around valuations for the rateable value for individual businesses and when those come through. Any questions on that sheet before I move over?
Councillor Cox, Chair, and Councillor Wallace.
Okay, Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. It's just really just for information about the cash and cash equivalents. They've gone up, or appears to be quite substantially. Is there any reason for this, or is it just a timing, or could you provide any more details, please?
Claire, Janice.
I can't see hands up, sorry, while I'm presenting.
The timing of cash and the cash held on Treasury, I would expect. If you bear with me 1 second. Debbie, I can't find the page. I'll look through it while Claire's going through the rest of the presentation.
Lovely, thank you very much.
So I've got a couple of more areas to cover. So moving on to long-term liabilities.
Sorry,
So-
Chairman, I had a question on that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Councillor Wallace had a question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chairman. My question, I think, really probably more relates to, is applicable to the external auditors, and it relates to the cash and the cash equivalents. Can they tell me, please, how they verify the amount of cash that is held by the authority?
Yes, Stephen or Stuart, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask Stuart to pick up on the details of the review of cash and cash equivalents.
Thanks, Stephen. So really the first and perhaps the most sort of basic procedure that we complete is we actually obtain third-party confirmations for every single bank account that the authority actually has. We then perform additional procedures in relation to the bank reconciliations that are performed by the council, to obviously take into account and to test any differences between what's on the confirmations and what's actually in the accounts. And then one of the final procedures that we do is we then obtain, using the third-party confirmations that we've got, we obtain a listing of transactions that have gone through the bank post year-end, and really just look at those transactions to ensure that the position in terms of the cash position at the year-end is accurate, and that there isn't any transactions that should have been posted back into to ensure that there haven't been any transactions that have been posted around about the year-end that would impact upon the financial position that perhaps weren't necessarily appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Councillor Wallace?
Thank you. So when you say you seek third-party confirmations, you are saying that you go direct to the bank or the deposit holders and seek their confirmation that the figures are as stated. Am I understanding that?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Any other comments before we move on? Cheers. Back to you, Claire.
So I think I was up to long-term liabilities. Yes, that's where I was up to. So long-term liabilities have increased slightly by just over £1 million. That's in the main due to pension liability and finance lease, and some PFI creditors. But that's been offset by some long-term borrowing. Moving on to usable reserves. They've gone down slightly by 63,000, so I don't have detail on what that is, but in terms of the unusable reserves, they have increased by 46 million to 27.283 million. This is mainly against the pension reserve, which has improved by 26.158 million, and the capital adjustment account, which has also seen an increase of 24 million, or just over 24.2 million. The financial instruments revaluation reserve, which holds the airport valuation, has decreased by 3.6 million as a result of an impairment around the value of the airport due to COVID-19 and generally what's happening in the industry at the moment. And as with reserves, they're notional and they don't impact on the bottom line of the authority. They just reflect the technical adjustments related to the account code of practice. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
Sorry, I've just got a helicopter going over.
Okay, then can we go back to Janice? Do you want to complete this section?
Yes, Chair, obviously that's a short presentation for what is a meaty document. So I'm happy to take any further questions that members might well have. I've got some of my technically more able colleagues present to support me, but happy to take any questions, or if members want to submit them in writing, however it suits the committee.
Thank you, Janice. Any questions, comments?
Chair, sorry, Martin Rankin. Yes, I've got a comment, very brief comment.
Okay, thanks, Martin.
Just simply that I think it's very pleasing to see, recognising the very hard work of the council officers, it's very pleasing to see such a very stable set of accounts, especially from the point of view that the actual net debt position is down by around £11 million since 2019. So well done all the officers.
Yeah, thank you. Good comment. Does anyone else have a question? Comment?
I guess, Chair, what I would say is the accounts are there for inspection and for anybody to spend their time reading. So if any committee member finds they have further things they want to ask, then I'm more than happy to pick anything up following the meeting.
Okay, thanks, Janice.
Chair, we've got a couple of requests. Stephen Reid first, and then Anthony McMullen. Chair.
Okay, Stephen Reid, please.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose as a general comment and to draw to the committee's attention, given some of the earlier questions in the meeting, both in this item and previous items. As you're aware, Chair, our 2018-19 external audit was subject to independent quality review by the Financial Reporting Council. That review has now been concluded, and the results of that review were a 2A, which signifies, in terms of a scale of 1, 2A, 2B, or 3, which signifies that there were only limited and or minor findings which resulted. I hope that provides assurance to members over the quality of the work that we do, certainly based on the findings from the independent FRC review, and I'm very happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor McMullen?
Yes, my comment was pertaining to the accounts that have been laid out. You remember, I think in the previous meeting, we asked if the members wanted training, and I went and attended. I think you also did, Kevin, the CIFCA training. I must admit, the documents we've got were much better than the examples in the training. I find these a lot easier to read than the actual ones we got in our training. So I just want to commend the council officers in having a better and more coherent statement than we got from the regulatory body. So,
yeah, I mean, yeah, along with Anthony, I attended the CIFA webinar on annual accounts. Actually, I found it very, very interesting, and certainly gave me an insight to the accounts which I didn't previously have. And I would recommend it to any of the members of the committee to go on, because I think it's run again in September this year.
I say it was definitely very helpful because there's bits in there that I now know how to read in a different light to how I would normally approach it.
Yeah.
But I do think these ones are easier to read than the examples we were given.
Yeah, I think they're all there as well. Yeah. Is there any other questions or comments? In that case, can I ask all members to turn on their microphones and ask, do members wish to approve the recommendations contained in the report?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 8, annual governance statement. I think Janice Gillespie will take us through this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this is the updated annual governance statement that we are required to produce on an annual basis. If you recall, you reviewed the position looking forward in November, and and this is an update on that as we look to close 1920 and look ahead. The format of the statement is the same as previous years. What I would highlight on the papers on page 2 is the COVID risk being added in terms of on page 259 of the papers, so significantly in terms of governance of the organisation. Obviously we have to recognise the issues that we face in managing the impacts of COVID, and in particular now our approach to recovery. So we recognise that as a particular area of governance that we need to keep an eye to as we go through this current financial year that we are now in. So that sets out there the factors that we consider when looking at the government's issues and any control issues that we need to reflect on as we move forward. I think there are no other issues in particular kind of would wish to bring the attention to the committee in terms of the governance statement, other than we will continue to keep this under review as we get to the closure of the statement of accounts, and if we're required to update the governance statement at that time, we will do.
Okay, thank you, Janice. Do we have any questions? Any comments? Okay then, again, can I ask all members to turn on the microphones and ask, do members wish to approve the recommendations contained in the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Thank you. If we can move on to item 9, 2019-20 opinion on the framework of governance, risk management and control. Kevin MacDonald will lead us on this one. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report is the Chief Internal Auditor's opinion on the adequacy and effectiveness of the framework of governance, risk management and control for the 2019-20 year. The report before the committee this evening just explains what we mean by the framework of governance, risk management and control. It gives the opinion for the year, which is satisfactory overall, which is a positive opinion for the authority. The report then gives it some detail around the work performed by the team during 2019-20, which has provided the evidence to allow that decision, that opinion to be provided. And that some of those details are covered in a little bit more detail in the next agenda items following this item. After that in the report, there's just a summary of some of our conformance with the public sector internal audit standards, which obviously the team are required to comply with. Chair, I think I'd just draw the committee's attention to paragraphs 3.2 and 3.7 of the appendix, which are on pages 276 and 277. Paragraph 3.2 just outlines that the opinion for the 2019-20 year is satisfactory overall and is in accordance with all of the regulations and the standards with which we comply. Paragraph 3.7 just highlights that we are obviously in the middle of a pandemic. That obviously began at the very end of the 2019-20 year. It will, the impact and I suppose the consequences of that pandemic are still evolving and still happening in real time. That will no doubt form more of an issue for the work and the opinion presented on the 2021 year, the current year. But in respect of the 2019-20 year, it's just we were aware of it, but it doesn't affect the opinion overall, which is satisfactory for that year in its entirety. Chair, I wouldn't propose to say too much more than that, but obviously happy to answer any questions.
Okay. You have any questions? Sorry?
Councillor McMullen, Chair.
Councillor McMullen, please.
Yeah, I'm looking through this. There's a nice table on page 279 of outcomes or at least things that management need to look into. But I'm not seeing in here, and I think in previous years we've had tables of either the volume of days we've received as part of the joint service, or even the volume of actual audits undertaken. I'm not getting that from this report, but maybe I'm not looking hard enough.
If I can just respond to that, Chair, certainly the number of days is not highlighted in the report. We do, under paragraph 4.2, we do reflect the resourcing in the team where we did have an absence during the year. We've had a vacant post during the year, which is now filled. And we also had one long-term sickness absence during 2019-20, which reduced the number of days that were available to us from the North Tyneside establishment. We do obviously have a shared service which gives us some resilience to be able to when we do have instances such as that where we can call on those resources as best we can. In terms of the work undertaken, Councillor McMullen, there is at Annex A to the appendix on page 285. There is there the list of the formal reports which have been issued during the year, those that are pending, and some details of some of the other work that we've been involved with during the year. So I don't know if that answers your question, Councillor McMullen.
Probably in part, so I'm still very concerned about the days, but in the volumes on like 285, yeah, 285, it's got reports pending where the draft report's been issued. Has there been other things that have slipped that we just haven't done because we didn't have the resource because of the aforementioned 1.4 resource miss?
I think the short answer is yes. When we come to a future agenda item regarding the plan outturn for 1920, that takes the plan that was agreed in March 2019 in detail and takes through every single piece of work that was originally planned and what's happened to that piece of work to give a full trail to the committee of exactly what's happened. We've also been involved in some additional work during the year which we didn't foresee at the time that the plan for 1920 was put together. And obviously as a committee would expect us to divert those resources to where it was needed in terms of emerging risks rather than sort of stick slavishly to that plan. For all it only affected the very end of the 2019-20 year, the pandemic situation is a good example of that, where we did have to divert resource to deal with some of the reactionary measures to that pandemic at the time.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Can I ask them, do we not have information that we've had previously relative to days then?
Sorry, Chair, we haven't included the number of days in the report. We can certainly look to do that and make sure that we do that in future reports to the committee, just to make that clear. If that would be beneficial to the committee, absolutely.
I think that's a good idea, Ken. Yeah.
No problem.
Councillor Wallace, Chair.
Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chairman. In the annex, Annex A, the audit reports that were issued and the opinions, I don't think we have further details of some of these elsewhere in the agenda. The deprivation of liberty safeguards, where it's a limited opinion, can you give us some indications to why that was limited? And related to that, does that audit also involve Northumbria Healthcare Trust, who I'm thinking will be involved in similar issues, or are these entirely separate?
Yes, thank you. I'll answer that as best I can, Councillor Wallace. That report was the future item where we talk about the key outcomes of our reports, which is a later agenda item. That audit was actually included in that report, which came to the November 2019 Audit Committee meeting. So we've provided the detailed summary of that piece of work to a previous meeting of the committee. From recollection, I understand that for all the audit received the limited assurance opinion. a lot of that related to a backlog in terms of referrals through to the service, which resulted as a result of some national changes in legislation and national arrangements. So I think that North Tyneside Council was one authority of a number in the country which was affected by that. I do believe that a lot of work has now been done by the service area in terms of getting that backlog down, and I understand that that is now in a much better position than it was at the time of the audit back in 2019.
Sorry, Chair, may I just add to Kevin's comments?
Sure.
It's Mark Golden from the Internal Audit Team. I undertook that audit. It was completed almost 12 months ago, and Kevin is absolutely right in that there was a change a little while ago in legislation which caught a lot of people, a lot of authorities around the country on the hop, and the number of referrals the council then had to assess went through the roof. Thousands of numbers, and it caught a lot of councils across the country by surprise. It's very difficult. The deprivation of liberty safeguard standards are changing, I think, later this year, although that might be delayed now because of the pandemic, and they're going to the liberty protection standards, which is going to help with the whole administration of that, and hopefully things will be a little bit better.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Councillor Wallace?
That's fine, thank you, Chairman. I do remember now, actually, and thanks to Kevin and Mark for their further explanations. I'm presuming that you will probably go back to that work, Kevin, given your reservations and given the changes that that will be back on the plan in due course.
Yes, Councillor Walsh, that will be followed up and evidence checked in accordance with our normal processes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. In that case, can I ask all members to turn on their microphones and ask to members who wish to approve the recommendations contained in the report?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
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 Thank you. Moving on to item 10. Which is key outcomes from internal audit reports issued between 1st November 2019 and 1st of July 2020. Kevin, if I could pass it to you, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, as just sort of briefly discussed, this is the latest report just summarising the key outcomes from all internal audit reports issued during the 6-month period. I would just draw members' attention to the table which begins on page 297 of the papers. Hopefully members will be familiar with the format where we take all of the, for each report that's been issued, there's just a one-page summary which tries to put on one page some of the key issues arising from the work, the good practice that we identified, the number of recommendations in the opinion level, and any progress made or actions taken since the report was issued. I would just point out two things to the committee. One, which is on page 296, there is a list of bullets of some working groups we've been involved in. One of those groups just appears as CPPR, and just because the acronyms kind of slip through, it's just to explain that that actually stands for Children's Payment and Process Redesign Group. It's not spelled out in the report. And the other thing I'd just like to point out, Chair, is that usually members will be aware that we, as part of this report, we detail some of the evidence checking of implementation of recommendations. Due to obviously the current arrangements in place, we haven't this time gone out to service areas to undertake that evidence checking. It's not gone and won't be lost. We will do that. It's just a matter of timing, but just to assure the committee that we will undertake that evidence checking at a later time when it's probably a bit more appropriate to do so, and report that back to Audit Committee in due course. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Councillor McMullen, Chair.
Councillor McMullen.
Hello. My question pertains to page 298. And actually all the tables, to be fair. The first thing is, I think I've probably raised this in past ones, which is I have no idea of when this audit was actually done, except for between November and July, which is quite a wide timescale. And the email system review, that seems to be very, very much tailored around our on-premises email. And I know through the last couple of, since December time, we moved everybody to Office 365, which moved most of the emails from on-prem in the Kilnworth data center to somewhere that Microsoft's got hidden under a hill somewhere. So it's just the comments here are all very much about the security of the 3 key holders and the locks of Mordor or Kilnworth data center, but it doesn't seem to actually reflect what is now reality. So I think data would be really helpful, and are you going back around that to cover the changing nature of our email system?
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I can just respond to that. Yes, the comment about dates is noted, Councillor Mullen, and we'll certainly look to add that into future reports to the committee if that would be of help. Yes, you are entirely right about the authorities' move in terms of the email platform. This work was commenced and undertaken prior to that move to the Office 365 suite, and the findings or any findings from that work were used obviously as part of the move to help the authority make that move. You are correct that the issues identified relate to physical security, but they were the main issues that were identified in the report. The other more sort of background technical, if you like, parts of the work were actually, there were no major issues identified during that work. In addition to this planned audit of that email system at that point in time, we also have an audit plan for the coming year, looking at the new Office 365 suite. We've also been part of the Office 365 implementation working group as well throughout over the last sort of 12, 18 months or so, as the authority's been gearing up for that change and going through that change. And obviously the upcoming, the collaborative tooling solution, as well as the email facility as well, that will continue completely through the implementation. And then we'll obviously have a different auditors undertaking the actual internal audit review of that new system once implemented than those officers who've been involved as part of that ongoing project assurance role as part of the working.
Thank you, Kevin. Councillor McMullen.
Fine, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Any comments? In that case, can I ask all members to turn on their microphones and ask do members wish to approve the recommendations contained in the report?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item 11, the agenda, Strategic Audit Plan 2019-20, Final Monitoring Statement. Kevin.
Yes, thank you again, Chair. Chair, as we've already sort of briefly mentioned, this report is a report which we bring to the committee every year, just giving an update on the progress that the team have made with regards to the plan in place for the 2019-20 year. The report in front of the committee this evening takes the original audit plan which was agreed by committee in March 2019 and just takes the table which begins on page 307 and just take for each item that was included in the plan for 2019-20, gives an update in the final column as to what happened to each of those pieces of work. It also identifies where we had a number of additional requests which weren't included in the plan, and if that's meant that some pieces of work have been reprogrammed or moved to a time where that would be more beneficial to the authority, then that's also detailed within the table beginning on page 307. Again, I'm more than happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Do we have any questions, please? Any comments? Okay, can I ask all members to turn on the microphones and ask, do members wish to approve the recommendation contained in the report?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Right, thank you. Moving on to item 12, which is the internal audit charter. Kevin MacDonald again.
Thank you again, Kevin. Yeah, Chair, the internal audit charter is basically it's required by the public sector internal audit standards, and therefore we have the audit charter in place, just covering the work that myself and the team undertake. It's stipulated in the standards that audit charter is periodically reviewed and refreshed as necessary, and then is periodically brought back to the audit committee for approval. The audit charter currently in place was brought through audit committee in November 2017 and agreed by committee at that time, and it was just felt timely just to refresh that, make sure it still was in accordance with all the guidance, and bring that back through audit committee just for reapproval, Chair. The only change within the charter, other than some really minor cosmetic changes, is in paragraph 5.5, which is on page 326. Basically, that paragraph just outlines the measures that are in place to enforce the independence of the Chief Internal Auditor role. That paragraph previously explained that where there was any area where the Chief Internal Auditor may have some responsibility, that there were adequate separation of duties in place throughout the team. What we've actually done this time is just spell out exactly what those arrangements are. So in the example of, say, risk management, any work on that area will be led by, issued by, and reported in the name of the Group Assurance Manager rather than the Chief Internal Auditor, just to maintain the independence of the Chief Internal Auditor role. That's something that's always been in place. It's just we've made it a little bit more explicit in the charter and made the wording slightly more explicit. Other than that, Chair, that any amendments are very minor and cosmetic in nature. But again, happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Any questions, please? Any comments? In that case, can I ask all members to turn on the microphones and ask, do members wish to approve the recommendations contained in the report?
Agreed.
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 Thank you. At this point, I would like to thank any members of the public watching the live stream, as the live stream will now stop and we will move on to item 13 on the agenda.